This is the London Fintech Podcast, bringing you practical insights and approaches, stories and inspiration from the innovators who are building the new world of financial services. This podcast is brought to you by NextWave, strategy specialists and solutions for financial institutions. Welcome to London Fintech Podcast. I'm here today with Elizabeth Rossiello to talk about payments and entrepreneurship in frontier markets. Elizabeth is the CEO and founder of AZA Finance. They're a global fintech specializing in Africa that was founded in Nairobi in 2013, and they're the go-to partner for businesses needing foreign exchange, treasury, payments, and settlement in markets all across Africa and probably elsewhere. I've noted they've actually helped customers in 180 countries, maybe have a bit more of a global span. Elizabeth will tell us some more. Elizabeth, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Now, how's your week been so far?
Pretty hectic. We have big announcements and exciting times for the company.
Well, I'm sure we're going to hear some more about that. But where are you speaking from today? Where's HQ for you?
I'm currently in London. We started the company in Nairobi, moved over to Lagos and Dakar, and then up to London. We've got 7 offices globally, so I'm always kind of floating in between.
And have you always been based in Africa, or are you based in Africa for some of that time? I guess it'd be interesting to know how much of a rotation you have between those various locations.
Well, it was about 8 years in Kenya, and then a year in Lagos, and then a few years, 3 years in Senegal, before moving up to London just after COVID. And, I think it was important when we started to sit with the team, sit in the first market. And then once that market got launched, I moved to Nigeria to launch that market. And that was steady. We moved on to Senegal and Francophone. I meet some founders who are not in market and in the early days, and I think that's a must. But as the company scales, I also think it's important for the founder, and I'm on the board as well, to be near investors, to be near key clients, and things like that. And I was traveling a lot to London. This is where a lot of the clients fly through, and half our clients are non-African paying into Africa. So this is a good base so far for the last couple of years.
Where did you grow up? Where are you from originally? And what's the Africa link?
I'm from New York. I'm from Queens, which is the county in the US that has the most languages spoken. It's one of the most diverse places I find on planet Earth, Queens, New York. So I started there and I studied languages and politics. And so I traveled abroad. And after I got my graduate degree in finance and I was working in investment banking in Europe, I was really just fed up with the same old thing. And I was reading a lot about microfinance. And that was the year Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize. So I was like, how can I use my skills in finance and my love of different cultures and different countries and different economies. And I applied for a job with one of his joint ventures, Planet Finance, which was between Jacques Attali in Paris and Muhammad Yunus. And they gave me a job in Kenya. So sight unseen, I went from Europe, I was in Zurich at the time in Switzerland, down to Nairobi and started this crazy adventure. And I worked 5 years in the field all across sub-Saharan Africa. I headed the office in Nairobi, and once a month I went to a new country. Malawi, Togo, Benin, Guinea-Conakry, DRC, everywhere, doing these ratings, talking to regulators, governments, banks. Just got my first real education, honestly. Forget Ivy League school. That was much more educating.
Yeah.
And then after that 5 years of work, I founded the company.
Wow. I mean, that really is. So I was going to ask you what the definition of frontier market meant, but you mentioned the Democratic Republic of the Congo there, and sort of this is 5 years before you started the company. So that, I guess that was on the frontier.
Well, we were always joking, where I lived in Nairobi. Nairobi is one of the UN hubs globally. So a lot of my friends work for international organizations and, we're on the front lines with refugee work or vaccine work or security work. And I was just visiting banks in these places. So yes, to somebody sitting in London, the Democratic Republic of Congo sounds crazy, but I was still sitting in a bank office, like, going through loan files or like, talking to the IT guy at the bank. Yes, it was in Lubumbashi and, we had great food at night and it was, the airports are a little different, but, I'm not like in a container or a tent. So I think we have to just remember that the African content is not just what you see in movies. I'd be sitting in a boring bank lobby like anywhere else.
I guess this was still pretty early in finance evolution for the continent. I mean, I've read things about microfinance and SMS payments on Nokia brick phones, and how the African countries in some extents are ahead on some of the payments protocols and things. But this has been going on for a long time. Do you feel that you were sort of right in there at the beginning?
Well, definitely in terms of mobile money. We were there 2 years. I mean, I moved there 2 years after the first mobile money launched. So I was there to see that huge boom. But don't get me wrong, my banking experience in Nairobi or even, DRC is better than my bank in South London when I moved up here. I mean, I don't know where you grew up, but
Interesting.
when you go to Brixton's, I was in the Clapham Metro Bank. I mean, that place is another level. You can wait 2 hours to get, something simple. So I
We'll have to
definitely,
get Metro back on the show to talk about that.
I mean, I would like, let's not say, let's be clear. When I would go into I&M Bank in Nairobi, they were amazing. Everything was digital. I would use my phone to withdraw from the ATM in 2009. 2009, that's what we were
Wow.
doing down there. So I mean, was it on the frontier? Yes. But, it's like what we see now with this propaganda war between China and the US. They're like, the US is the backwards country. And, look what we do in China, look at the buildings and all that technology. So I think it was just very surprising for a lot of people that visited me when I was down there. I would be like, yeah, look at what we could pay with. Look where we can go. Yeah, the road infrastructure, the healthcare infrastructure, housing infrastructure, the level of economic disparity is nothing like it was up north of the equator. But I think technology wise and financial services, East Africa was in the middle of a banking boom. Kenya developed their middle class at that time. Most of my neighbors had way nicer cars than I did. And, when you go over to Lagos, even better. They have had 24/7 banking for almost 2 decades now. So much more advanced than you see in North America.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and I'm actually this is obviously a remote recording. I'm talking to you from Clapham right now, so I'm going to go check out the Metro branch after the conversation.
No, don't go there. It's backwards.
Brilliant. And I'm not sure the awareness of sort of how far the African nations have come. In fact, how early they've reached that level of sophistication and technology is really out there. So maybe this episode will help a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, when I land in the airport, like I was just in Lagos and Accra, and like the back of my phone, I don't have it here, but usually has a bunch of SIM cards on it. I can land, get through security using an e-visa, get myself my eSIM card, and get into Uber or whatever I booked within like 25 minutes. And try to get a phone sign up in London, and tell me how long that takes you, and how many guys you have to go talk to in the office with khaki pants, before all the forms they're filling out. It takes forever. I just tried to get my teenager a phone here. I mean, it's nothing to compare with. So I think it was really exciting to be there at that time when this was taking off. And there's so much technology available in emerging markets that doesn't get a lot of recognition.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can help a little bit, and I hope the UK banks and the global firms that are here are paying attention. So I always ask people, sort of topical conversation, what they like to do when they're not on duty, because everyone I talk to is a founder or an exec in some fast-moving organization and doesn't have much downtime. But there's been some interesting answers at how people decompress. So what are you doing when you're not working on the business?
Well, I'm an ex ballerina, like many high powered women. We all started it all as being yelled at in a ballet studio. So, I like to keep it going now that I'm middle aged. I do a lot of yoga. I do it at home, I do it wherever I can. So, I read this really cool Harvard business a review article about CEOs and how they split their time, and all the big and bestest have some sort of physical movement, some sort of meditative, religious, or meditation or peaceful movement, and then spend time with their family every single day. And then the way they achieve that is they have a gatekeeper of their calendar, and they're very efficient with their time. So I try to mimic that. I definitely do a lot of yoga. I cook on the weekends. I don't have time to cook during the week. And I make sure I eat dinner with my family at least 3 times a week if I'm not traveling. Think it's really important. Or if I can't eat dinner, I'm eating breakfast. So I'm spending one meal at the table with my family, moving around. I just was at a dinner, and this other exited founder was like, now you can finally see your family. And I was like, I'm female. I've been seeing my family.
Yeah, you have to make that happen.
I try to be well rounded throughout. I don't think it's like a star in your crown if you're like, I never sleep, I never see anyone. I'm like, that's terrible manager. That manager's going to be yelling at everybody, repeating questions, unable to memorize things people tell them.
Yeah. Are you part of the 5 a.m. crew? Is your sort of yoga hour followed by meditation?
Oh,
Day day
no,
starts early?
mornings are hectic here. I usually am catching up with Nairobi, which has already started their day 2 hours early. So I do my exercise when the house is sleeping.
Okay. Interesting. So the other way around. Yeah, it's so important to keep a balance. We'll talk about the business in a minute, but just a little bit more about you. You've been named, I think this year by American Banker as one of the most influential women in payments. And you've also had quite a few other accolades along the way as well, power lists and various awards. Can you tell us a bit more about that recognition, sort of, what's behind that and what does it mean to you?
Well, obviously these awards come and go, but I think it's just very important to me to have representation. I've been doing this 13 years, and I can count on my hand how many female CEO fintech founders that I've met that have been doing it over 5 years, and even less that have been doing it over 10 years, and even less that have been doing it in emerging markets or something. So, or that were the founder CEO. I mean, it's a very small club. I always tell my marketing team as we go out there, let's make noise about it. It is important. And on all of the dozens and dozens of podcasts I do, I talk about it. And I didn't used to do that a couple of years ago. I didn't mention it as much, or I was told by a lot of people, be quiet about the girl thing. But I think it's important because it's part of who I am and it's part of who the company what is. It's made it harder. And so I'm really proud that we got through. And it is more of a challenge. And I know there's a lot of people who say, oh, not anymore. That's not true. So, I'm really proud to be recognized. And I love these things that like shine a light on stories of women who have made it through.
Yeah, really important to be raising the profile because that just has a benefit for everyone else. And actually, maybe I'll connect you after the show, but the last episode we dropped of this, I was talking to Mia Drennan, who set up Glass, and they do loan advisory. And she's a female founder, absolute powerhouse. Had to, I think, do 400 sales meetings to get her first contract, and is very much, amplifying the opportunity and out there working to raise awareness and build an ecosystem for female founders. So I think you've got something in common. And are you more fin or are you more tech? Curious around that one. The AZA website talks very much about leading innovative technology. Obviously, every fintech is powered by the technology, but just thought that might be interesting to understand a bit more about where you focus.
Yeah, well, I mean, I come from a financial background. I have a master's in finance and I worked in banking before that. I think I was working when I was at Credit Suisse on a technology implementation project for some of our biggest clients, but I really learned everything I know about tech work running this company. And I've worked hand in hand with our CTOs over the years, had an incredible partnership with our founding CTO, Baba Man, who lived in my guest house and taught me everything I know, and then Callum Dreden, who's our CTO now. And we work collaboratively running the product function together. And this business and this level of detail that we have to have, because our market is 55 smaller markets, and each one has incredibly unique product specifications, feature needs, integration nuances with all of our partners. So to be able to sell and to be able to run operations, you have to have A to Z understanding of our tech stack and our product. And so I've become very tech over the last 13 years. And I think it's important to say that because there was this weird, thing when we started of like, oh, are you an engineering CEO? Are you an engineering tech founder? Haven't really found tech founders to be great managers. No offense to some of them. and a lot of, non-tech founders are great at products. So I really think if you're going to be a true leader, you have to understand your business in all elements from top down. And there are going to be parts of your executive team that know something deeper. Obviously, I don't know everything that my chief legal knows, but I get in the weeds when necessary, and I think that's what makes a great leader.
Yeah, that sounds like the right balance. I mean, fundamentally, solving problems and delivering service to your customers. So you start with the business, and then if you've got some good people around you, you can go deeper on aspects of building the technology of the operation. Then that's where you're going to get a great team. Couldn't agree more. Tell us a bit more about frontier markets. You just said you're working in 55 smaller markets. So, what does that phrase really mean to you? And what are some of the complexity perhaps that you're dealing with operating across your client base?
Well, a lot of the challenge Africa has faced is that it's not one big market and it's not like easy to digest for a lot of investors like the United States or, Europe, which they still see as one big market. It's 55 markets in Africa with, that many currencies and that many nuances and about 10 large markets in Africa, in North, Sub, and Southern Africa that really have that market share to make a go at an early stage company. So I think the frontier region we focused on is sub-Saharan Africa. We have entered North Africa recently. We have a very strong foothold in Europe and the Middle East now as well. We trade in, out, and across Africa, which means half our clients are out of Africa coming in. About 30% are in Africa going out of Africa, and about 20% are in Africa going to another part of Africa, intra-Africa. So it's very important for us that we had licensing in the UK. We've got licensing in Europe. We've had that for over 10 years. Had a license from the FCA and the Bank of Spain. I bought a company there to acquire. We had Abu Dhabi license at the ADGM early days. I think we were in the second cohort ever from them. We have licenses all across the continent, Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, Ghana, Cameroon, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, you name it, Egypt. So I think, all of these markets require a multi pronged approach. And that scared a lot of investors in the early days. They're like, just go in one market and do that well. And you're like, unfortunately, you can't do that. The risk appetite in emerging markets is that you have to have multiple irons in the fire. You have to have multiple markets going because the volatility is too high. That would be like telling somebody like a high vol trader on a trading floor, only invest in one product. Obviously, they're going to invest around it. They're going to use derivatives. They're going to use all sorts of structured tools because it's too volatile to just invest in a single asset. And so that's kind of what you have to do in emerging markets. And we have a lot of similarities to those companies like Dlocal, who is in the middle of an acquisition process for us because they have to deal with a lot of the LATAM markets, or we have a lot of similarity with like a Southeast Asian companies who have to work into like 4 or 5 markets in Southeast Asia. And I think that's a unique aspect of working in frontier markets that, I think investors don't normally think about upfront, but has to be our reality.
Yeah, and you've been going for a while. I mean, you've established multiple licenses and operating footprint. You just ran through, a long list, and I'm sure there's some more. Is anyone else doing this, or is that, have you got a bit of a moat around all of this now because it's taken so long to build that sort of footprint?
Well, when we started, there was like 1 or 2 companies doing it. One of them is still alive. One of them's pivoted and died. There have been companies along the way that have started. There's a lot of bodies on the road. It's a terribly grotesque analogy, but a lot of people have come and left. We really focused on the foreign exchange component. So while a lot of companies might have tried to build the infrastructure, they were doing it to process cards or create wallets or link to a telco. We were doing it to settle our foreign exchange trades. So we had a very high margin and unique deep moat USP for the market. And that remains today. And now a lot of those guys are like, hey, how do we get into FX and Treasury? And the last few years, we've seen a lot of cross-border payments companies be like, oh, we're doing FX and Treasury. And I'm quite proud. It's nice to have followers because they've understood what we're going for. But in the early days, we were the only ones focusing on FX and the only ones saying payments is about Treasury. And if you get the Treasury right, the settlement, the price, that's your speed and your price. That's what the customer wants. Speed, price, ease of use. UX and cute wallet comes a little bit later. But in terms of a B2B business, it's all about your operations.
Yeah, and so do tell us a bit more about what you're doing now, because I think you have a range of services, and you talked about, I think, a variety of types of transactions that you're supporting. But as the fintech for Africa's B2B sector, which I think it says on your homepage, that there's more than one thing that you're doing for your clients.
Right. So, like I said, we settle in, out, and across Africa for wholesale payments. And the special sauce of AZA is our FX pricing. And this is where we're, I would say, head and shoulders above everybody else. We have a very strong trading desk. We work as a market maker in many of these economies. We have dual licenses on either side. And we work with some of the biggest companies in the world, MoneyGram, Western Union, PayPal, and Procter & Gamble. So, we have 13 years history building this regulatory framework and then trading on it. And we've teamed up and announced a partnership a few months ago with Dlocal, which is a very well-known, publicly traded global processor. So we were never really doing retail processing or P2P processing. They're a very large processor. So that was a really great partnership. And we just announced last week that they are in the process of acquiring us, and we're waiting for regulatory approval. So that's exciting. There have not been many exits in this space of this region. I think a lot of the companies that were doing payments in Africa were doing retail, or they're doing, wholesale, but who were the buyers? And there's a lot of talk about investing in Africa, but not a lot of exits have happened. So we're very excited about this. There's a potential to become, one of the bigger exits, and just over time showing the value of building that on and off ramp infrastructure and then showing how to trade on it.
Yeah. I can see the power of that tie-up. I was talking to Pete Wicks, who's the EMEA head for WorldPay on this show just a few weeks ago. And we were trying to unpack the payments landscape between, acquirers and processors. And it's super complicated. And there's hundreds, well, thousands of firms in the space. But if perhaps, and maybe I'll get the characterization wrong, but if you're the FX engine, with Dlocal as the processor and with the interface with the retailers, then I can see that you're going to get a real leverage from that.
So, you have to think about it as inbound and outbound, right? Who are the people paying into Africa? And those are remittance companies, payment companies, salary payment companies for remote workers, maybe some UN agencies, donors, et cetera, like that, some banks. But paying out of Africa is a very different demographic. It's merchant processors, people buying things from China, people importing pharmaceuticals from the Middle East, people importing construction. It's more wholesale, I would say. Merchants or large scale importers, exporters, and then, even some banks and things like that. So you have two very different groups of customer segments, and they have different product needs. One might need credit card processing like outbound. One might need an API for mass retail remittance payouts. So most of the companies that work in the space either work on one side or the other. We're pretty unique. AZA, we're trying to capture FX from everybody. So we have our API that has different product features to focus on wholesale or B to B to C. So like a remittance company that's processing to their consumer. And I think this just that kind of adds to the complexity. It's like when you're in the United States or you're in Europe, you could focus on just one and it's the same vertical in and out. But when you're in emerging markets, you have like these very different needs that match up the market. And that means different product that face those clients and different types of layers of the vertical and the payment space. So I think some of these African fintechs and emerging market fintechs try to do everything. They try to, have the B2B, P2P, B2B2B, all this kind of stuff. We really focused on just wholesale. So it's great to focus on someone who does more retail collection. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And you major on cutting edge technology, I think, as a talk about that. And you mentioned the API briefly there. Can you give us an example of, perhaps how the platform's leading?
Yeah, well, we were the first exchange on planet Earth in 2013 to do the digital currency remittance flow. So we were the first ones to launch digital currencies to mobile money when we launched Bitcoin to M-Pesa in 2013 with our BitPesa product, which was beyond cutting edge. People were like, what planet did you guys come from? What the heck are you talking about? You should have seen me at dinner parties. People were like, that girl. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, I'm going to stop you there and say, what are you talking about? What's
Yeah,
that
we were
product?
like, Nairobi, Kenya, 2013, we launched BitPesa, which was Bitcoin to M-Pesa. And you could send money from anywhere in the world to M-Pesa. And that was too early, I almost will say. People were not ready for that. And we got into a lot of big fights with the regulator and the telco and a lot of global infamy about it. And then we moved to a more fiat API, which was aggregating all the telcos across Africa and all the bank accounts. And so it didn't matter if you were a bank, a PSP, or a telco, we would have one API that paid out to all those wallets. So we were one of the first to do that. And then obviously when stablecoins became popular a few years, became one of the first to trade in stablecoins. And people always like fly me to Davos to speak on stage to be like, this is our use case, Elizabeth. So, and I was the chair at the blockchain council there for a couple of years.
Yeah, I
And
saw that.
yeah, because everybody was talking about it, but we were doing it. And, I think Jack from Airwallex just did a big post on LinkedIn saying, what's the point of stablecoins? And we're like, well, weekend settlement and dollar holiday settlement. So if it's Memorial Day or Martin Luther King Day and also Ramadan, we need to process billions of dollars of remittances into the African continent. And you can't expect local banks and local PSSPs to take a third day risk over a weekend. It's just a lot of credit risk for these institutions. So stablecoins let you settle 24/7 globally. And it's not for regulatory arbitrage, it's for reduced friction. And so I think we've been doing that for years. Yeah, 13 years we've been working with digital currencies.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot on that in just the last few weeks. So there's various moves by firms like Stripe, and there's
Yeah, we're really excited.
stablecoins going mainstream, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Stripe has been an investor in Paystack, which has been a card processor in Nigeria for years, which we love. We love the team at Paystack, Shola and Amandine. And, Stripe has been watching that space for some time. And we love the team at Bridge. So very excited to see that happen. I think it does wonders for the market and shows just how serious they are about this. And people in the space who settle in emerging markets have been using this technology. A lot of other companies have been talking about it, but this has been something that's been happening for some time. It's not the majority use case, but it has been happening.
Yeah, another example of Africa leading the way, actually. Well, with a bit of help from you. But I was going to ask you, what's your vision for the business and how far along you are currently? Guess the answer is going to be wrapped up with the Dlocal
Yeah, well,
acquisition.
we're making our way through the regulatory process, and we already have a partnership. So we have a strong trading partnership with them, which is great. They're a great partner of ours in many markets, and we're teaming up to give our clients the best coverage across all of our network. So that's already happening and quite exciting. And then depending on the regulator, we'll see how entwined things get going forward. But there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think our focus, as is focus on EMEA, has been so clear, and which makes our infrastructure so deep. We haven't been distracted, we haven't been moving around. So I think we're only going to keep building on this infrastructure and getting the best quality of service for our clients. I mean, a lot of our big clients have been there for years, and even when times were tough, or we didn't have a lot of funding, or different cycles, they would still trade with us, and we're like, wow, this big client, we can't shake them. And they would say, you're the only one with this infrastructure, you're the only one that we know is going to settle T1, and we don't know how you do it, but you're always there for us. And that just is so motivating, and I think there's another decade of work to be done getting that quality of service even deeper in the continent.
Yeah, what's on the roadmap under new ownership then, if you can say?
Well, like I said before, the ownership isn't complete yet because we're still waiting on the regulator. But we do know that Dlocal is committed to frontier markets, and so is AZA. So we can just say that that commitment is not going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Can we talk a minute about entrepreneurship in your sector? So 14 years, and it's been a journey. You highlighted a few things, but perhaps what are the moments you're most proud of along the way?
Surviving,
Love that.
everybody.
Have there been moments where that was ever a question?
Yeah, every day. I mean, I remember when I started, one of my girlfriends in my mom group, her husband was like this successful entrepreneur, and everybody looked up to him. And he's like, you're starting a company, And at the time, I was like in the mom group. I probably had like a baby on my hip and another one on my foot. And I'm like, yeah, I'm starting this company. And I looked up to him, and, he had all the funding and all the big Gates this and Apple that. And then years later, I saw him at a very fancy conference, and I was like, hey, and he's like, you're here too? And I was like, yeah, I'm here too.
And
And
you were probably speaking. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know.
not only that,
Who
I
knows?
was cheering. But yeah. So, but I remember being like, so have you made it? Right? You had such a head start. I was like covered in diapers when I started, and you were already out there. Do you feel good? Do you feel confident? And he turned to me with the same face that I looked at myself at every morning and was like, every day is a fight. Every morning I wake up and think, today's the day. It's all collapses. And I'm like, wow, you had such a head start and you're so successful and you still feel this. Then I realized like everybody feels that the whole way through, you know, that made it a lot easier. Like I said, like I'm getting a lot of people reaching out now saying, oh, are you finally going to relax? Are you finally going to see your family? Are you finally going to do these things you wanted to do? I've really tried to do that along the journey because, I felt very happy that I was running my own company and that I was my own boss, and we did have a great team, and we had a great board, and I tried to enjoy it along the way. And has it been rough? Yes, but I'm really proud that I stuck to my values and made sure the team felt supported. And we have an incredible working culture. As we won a lot of awards. We won again Inspiring Workplace, which is one of those awards you can't pay for. Like, we won it over
There's
and
still
over
some of
again.
those out there.
And we won it a couple times now, and I'm so proud of that award. I saw it in the PayPal lobby a decade ago, and I was like, this is the award that I want to win. And that makes me proud because people I've worked with have moved on and founded their own companies. A couple went to Y Combinator. A lot of them come back to me and say, my experience working in this team and the way we worked across such a big geography on such frontier things, and we stayed calm in the face of such volatility. That makes me the most proud. And I think people are like, oh, if you exit, are you going to miss being the boss? No, I'm going to miss having this great culture. It was an amazing experience. And I'm really thankful for everybody that I worked with along the way. And we still have a lot of work to go. So, the team is all still together. It's going to be a new chapter, but I think I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you can't really put a price on the culture, but it's so important, and it's really the resilience that sort of carries you through when you're having that bad day. And we have this in the consulting business. I sometimes have to remind myself, just go and talk to the team or go and talk to a client, and it puts things into perspective. And when you do get into a bit of a sticky patch, and we've had them with our business and continue to, then it's usually the culture and the team engagement and the resilience that actually pulls you through. And that's a product of treating people the right way and sort of being values led on the way up. And you just listening to you, I can sort of hear the passion coming through. Um, that's great, and I'm sure that's going to be a brilliant foundation for the next 10 years.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to go backwards now. I think now every team has to be healthy and working forward. We know what a good team looks like.
Yeah. So looking forward then, what do you see as the future trends in the payment space? And this is the early part of this conversation. I noted that the African countries and the areas you've been involved in, you've already ticked off a few of them for some other areas, some
Well,
of the
I
other
was just
countries.
I was just at Money 2020, and everybody's like, stablecoin, stablecoin. And I was like, oh, now you want to talk
Yeah, I've done
stablecoins.
that.
How many times, I think it was on stage at Money 2020, and I'll call him out here. I was on the stage with Wise and Neum CEOs, and the Neum CEO was like, only criminals want to trade on the weekend. And I was like, what? On stage at Money 2020, telling everybody that the only use of stable coins is for criminal activity. And I was like, are you mental? Do you have a treasury team? Do you understand what settlement means in terms for risk profile and liquidity, and how remittance companies, like the biggest five, expect you to pre-fund them as a processor? And I think, it was very easy to do a low blow on people using this technology a few years ago when it was not popular. And now everybody's running to it. So, I guess when you get old, you see your kids wear clothes you wore in middle school. And now you see people using technology you've been talking about for a decade. And I think it's rewarding in some aspects that we were ahead of the time. So I think let's see if this stays in popularity. I think for AI, obviously, that's the other buzzword everybody's using. We just implemented a really cool tool that makes it a lot easier for us to do reporting in South Africa. So we're quite excited about that. And there's been some innovation in the space. But I think right now the word on the street is stablecoins.
Yeah. Tell us about the AI reporting tool. What did you build that on? What does that do?
This is going to get nerdy real quick.
It's okay. We've got a nerdy audience, or some of them.
Well, for some markets, we have to do these special annual reports to the regulator for every single user. And every fintech has been trying to figure out a solution for this. And every solution that's been presented, the regulator or the big banks slap it down and say no.
Mm.
And then the users who have innovation in other parts of their life are getting shorter and shorter attention spans for things that don't have slick UX. And so what we ended up seeing last time around, last season when this was done, is the users complaining to the bank, saying, even calling the CEO of the bank, being like, filing hundreds of customer complaint reports. And the CEO of the bank is like, these users are calling me. And we're like, well, you wouldn't let us put this automation in. The users expect, lightning speed these days. And he's like, we've never had these problems before. And we're like, well, people expect second responses. They expect immediate form submission. They're not willing to wait days or weeks anymore. And so really the consumer has helped us push this with some of the slower partners accepting something that they were unwilling to accept before. So that's been quite exciting. And, there's just a lot you can do now with all these different providers to plug into your Salesforce and to plug into your customer support. And it's become quite seamless now. So for like, $50,000, $100,000 and just a month or two, you can add quite a lot of automation into, a single user process.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you can say, but any particular platforms? I'm asking just because this is the AI in production dialogue that's in the sector all the time, and I think it was Gartner who says, Gartner stat 79% of firms working on AI, only 1% of them have got any production value from it so far, and there've been hundreds of proof of concepts and but very little that's out there. So I'm curious where if you
I don't really want to give my competitors a tip on what I've done to
okay, well,
improve the mandate process. But yeah, let's just say we've improved the South African mandate reporting process by a factor of 10.
There we go. And if you want to know how, well, you're not going to find out on this episode.
Apply to work for us.
Yeah. Okay. So look, we're running out of time, but just sort of drawing this to a close. There was so much there in what we've been talking about. Is there anything you'd call out as a top takeaway or a lesson from everything you've been doing with AZA over the last 14 years?
Well, everything is cyclical. We know that from FX. We know that from politics. Good Lord, the cycle we're in now. And so I think I was at this thing with some new founders, and this woman was like, she's like, I was at Goldman Sachs. I could have been a millionaire if I stayed there. Why did I follow this dream of becoming a founder? And she's like, I'm looking at term sheets there my investors are giving me. And she's like, the way out is so narrow. To get out of this and, make it rich and be super successful is going to take years. And it's such a low probability given all of these hurdles in my way. Why have we found this? Why is everybody following this dream of entrepreneurship to become a founder? And, my answer to that is to create a work culture that I want to work in and to work on things that I want to do. And, we're at this complete lower barrier to entry now where we don't have to work for places we don't want to work for. And we can find our product market fit or find our passion and build a company with like-minded people and do that. And that's a reward. And, if you get so lucky as to keep doing it for over a decade, even better. And your clients are still there, even better. I think in these cycles, it's hard for a lot of founders and entrepreneurs to remember that, but it's just a cycle. If you push through, all the same things are still true, and you can kind of get to that next level. And I think, it is a bit of a, fake dangle to say everybody's going to exit with $1 billion exit. But, what we've done with this combination and this merger and everything is just something really exciting. We're continuing the business, and we're probably still going to keep working on this for the next 10 years.
And fulfilling, and that's so important, right? We've got targets in the next wave business, and I've got co-founders that work with me who could have stayed in big bank on a retirement track, and but have told me on many occasions, despite the fact that we've been on this roller coaster of first 2 years not paying ourselves anything, and then it's been up and down, and we've got our targets, but we're only part of the way there. Still saying that I've no regrets because I'm so proud of what we've built and the work we're doing and what we're creating for the team. And I think that's pretty much all of it, really. I think for those who take the founder journey. And do you have any advice for would-be founders out there, or perhaps female founders? Right, we were talking about that top of the conversation.
Well, what's happening to you is real. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not happening or you're imagining it. It is harder. That's a fact. And I think it's going to be a choice whether you choose to keep going. And, it's okay if you think it's too hard. And, what I hate the most is people go, oh, it's not harder. It's the same. Don't talk about it. That's undervaluing somebody's experience. It is harder. So seek allies. And I think I just went to this really amazing thing with like Sherry Blair and one of my board chairs who's like, in her 80s. And they were like, we only give time. We have such precious free time to things for other female founders. And I've heard that a lot amongst C-suites across the way of like very busy executive women. They're like, the only thing I give my free time to is helping other female founders. And I think if you're coming from any underrepresented group or minority, you start to feel that. And I think for those female founders out there, acknowledge your experience, look out for those helpers, ask for help, find a community. When I was in Nairobi, I was, pretty much all by myself. Luckily, I had a co-founder at the time, and we clung together. But once I finally moved on to Lagos and Dakar and London, I found bigger communities, and that made it so much easier. So I would just say, look out there for other communities and, cling together and keep going.
Yeah. It's definitely a team sport. And if you can find your tribe, your community, suddenly you're not sitting on your own, wondering whether or not you've, am I doing the right thing? And do I know the answer to that question? I mean, it just gets orders of magnitude easier the more if you're the right people that you can involve. So, and just as a takeaway, anything interesting you're reading or listening to currently?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to transition into reading again with any sort of free time I have. But I'm just reading like terrible war spy novels. And my family's like, you can relax a little. Like, maybe don't just read Cold War evil novels. Like, read something a little bit more relaxing. High suspense.
Well, at least you're not just reading business books and AI books.
No, I need to not listen to gangster rap and read Cold World War II spy novels. And it's like get into some more low frequency activities. It's like,
Listening to gangster rap, well, presumably not during the yoga sessions.
well, that's why I do yoga to balance it out. I need to listen to some, Yanni or some calmer music.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Elizabeth, this is brilliant. I've really loved the conversation. If folks want to get in contact with you or find out more about AZA or Dlocal as it's shortly to be, where do they contact you?
You can find me on LinkedIn or our website.
Yeah. Usual places. Okay. Well, look, thanks for being so open and sort of such fun guest and sort of unpacking all that interesting innovation that's happening in Africa and what you're doing with the business. And I wish you every success. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Tony.